I'm Dr. Samantha Bates, and I'm going to be co-hosting with my amazing co-host, Q Banks, who is a strength and conditioning coach for OSU basketball. And we are just thrilled to kick off tonight's session on leadership through sport. We're back again. We've done 2 other webinars, so check those out on our Coach Beyond website. And we had the honor, right, Q, of having Coach Tress in the building last month. And so, Katie and Sylvia, you're following a tough act, but we're super glad that y'all could be here tonight. Really quick for everybody in the audience, we've got some amazing questions. We're going to spend a ton of time talking to Katie and Sylvia, but tonight we want to really get you involved a little bit in reflecting on sort of leadership attributes and how we develop leadership skills. We want Katie and Sylvia to kind of increase our awareness of maybe how we can leverage sport, right, to reach and teach kids when it comes to leadership. Just to put on your hats, a lot of those joining us are high school, middle school coaches out in the communities and schools across Ohio. And then we want to think about some strategies that coaches can utilize to help our student athletes develop into those leaders. And Q's an amazing asset too on this panel tonight as a coach. So we'll be kind of ping-ponging questions around and getting your thoughts. But before we get to y'all's amazing bios, which Q is going to just show y'all off here in a minute, we want to kind of frame why we chose this topic. And it's really important right now. Faculty and emeritus professors like Dan Gold, who's at the Institute for Youth Sport, says that sport's actually a really underutilized spot for intentionally teaching leadership skills. When we surveyed Ohio coaches, though, almost 3 out of 4 said we want more training, more resources on how to leverage sport as a place to teach leadership. And then we also know this is new, groundbreaking Ohio State life sports and Coach Beyond research, but we're actually finding that coaches who obviously teach life skills in sport are actually having better success and feeling more satisfied in their job. So the boring professor, Dr. Bates, is done with her little research. And now I'm going to kick it off to Q to kind of intro our amazing guest speakers tonight. Q, take it away.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you. So our 2 amazing guest speakers today, we'll start with Katie Smith. Katie started her basketball career at Logan High School. While playing basketball here at OSU, she led the Buckeyes to a Big Ten championship, the NCAA title game, and broke the Big Ten scoring record for men's and women's basketball. By the way, won a Big Ten Player of the Year twice. And then she was a 3-time Olympic gold medalist and member of the Athletic Hall of Fame. Currently, Katie spends her time coaching and inspiring others, especially women, to grow the game she loves. And not to be outdone, Sylvia Fowles is a recently retired American professional basketball player for the Minnesota Lynx. She's a 4-time Olympic gold medalist, 4-time WNBA championship winner, 4-time WNBA Defensive Player of the Year, a 2-time Finals Most Valuable Player, 8-time All-Star, a WNBA Most Valuable Player in 2017. Now, in 2022, Sylvia won the WNBA Sportsmanship Award, finished her career as one of the top 10 scorers in league history. Now she's currently pursuing a career as a mortician. So we have some amazing panelists today. But let's go ahead and get started with some questions. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it. And for those watching, if you have anything in the chat, Sydney Mack, our amazing PhD student, is going to filter those and bring them to us at the end. So you'll see Sid watching for those. Q, kick us off, though, with some questions.
Let's do it. So first question for our guest. What does it mean for you to be a leader, and how do you define leadership?
Sil, do you want it?
You got it.
Hey, Katie.
Well, I'm lucky to have Sil on here tonight with me. I think she's kind of the ultimate leader. Really just happy that she joined us. But so how do you define being a leader? Leadership to me is like a lead by example. I think that's where probably my authentic self lives, more in the work and showing what should be done, or you want to do it, or trying to emulate, the right way to do it. So I think part of that by the lead by example is, being consistent. It's not a showing up one day and doing the right thing one time. It's consistently doing that and being that for yourself and for others. I think people are kind of drawn to people who they know they can depend on, that they know this is what I'm getting from them every single day. No, it's not the amount of points you score. It's not all the stats. It's who you are, the work you put in, the probably the personality that you come with every day. I think that's a huge thing. I think, being prepared, being locked in on what you're doing, making sure that you're not just like, oh, I didn't know, you know what I mean? It's just really being prepared on what you're doing. And I think there's a connection I think you have to be authentic to yourself. I think people really are drawn to people who are really true to themselves and maybe know who they are and maybe their values. I think that's also something that leaders, some of the best ones, and when you have a value system and you kind of everything comes from that, then you treat people the right way and you show respect and you're speaking to people. So it's I think it all comes from how do I want to be, and then all your decisions come from that. So those are some of the things I think leaders are. And again, the lead by example piece is big, but those are some of the things I think you have to have on a daily. So
Love that. Sylvia?
To me, it's hard to say what a leader is. Piggybacking off Katie, it don't come easy. But with that said, you have to be a person that's responsible. You have to be a person that has multiple filters to give out, because you take in so much energy from others. But you also have to be that sponge to have that personality, to be like, I might not have my best day, but I have to show up every day to make sure you at your best. And I think that's what a good leader is to me.
I
That's
like
awesome.
that. I heard you both say, like, be a role model, do it by example, which is the first kind of key element. You both mentioned that authenticity you bring into the room, be yourself, right? As the leader, find your way. I like, Sylvia, you brought up kind of takes in energy. You do have to be able to absorb. I used the word sponge, and I thought, ooh, you do have to be able to hold space for people, right? As a
Yes, you
leader.
do.
Yeah, I really resonated with that one. So I'm going to bring it back to y'all. How did you learn leadership skills kind of throughout your sports career, whether that's like a specific story as an athlete that you can go back to, or as a coach that says like, whoa, in that moment, I really learned what it meant to step up and be a leader. Any ideas come to mind?
Mine started at home. I'm the youngest of 5, but my mom held me to higher standards. I'm not quite a parent, but I guess parents see something in their children and they know who they can depend on more. And so for me, that was me. So the leadership kind of came natural for me, to just make sure I'm taking care of everything else around me and making sure everybody's good. So the basketball part just added on to that and just made it that much easier.
that's
So
awesome.
you've kind of always been a team member. That's what I'm
Yeah.
hearing. Wait, now do you have siblings? What's the
Oh yeah, they're
Okay.
older. I'm the youngest.
Old, okay, youngest. So
Yeah,
always
sure.
making sure the team was ready to go even out the
Yeah.
door. That's what I heard. Okay.
Yes, Sil, I can speak to that. Sil and I were teammates, but I've coached Sil as well. But there's a caretaking, there's a humility, there's a selflessness about it. I think that's, you talk about being a sponge, and I think if you're a leader or a coach, at the end of the day, it's really just not about you. It is about what does everyone else need. So you have to come strong. You have to be consistent. You have to be prepared. You have to come with your energy right, whether you're having a bad day, because again, it's all contagious, but you have to think of everyone else except for yourself, and still do your job. Right. So you're that's what the leader is, and that's whether the coach or that's the best player on the team. And it's a lot to ask, and it is draining, and it is challenging, and you have to kind of find your outlets and your people that are going to support you and pick you up. But I had a moment when I was, Sylvia and I probably similar in a way, very tunnel vision, focus, like basketball players, right? We knew exactly where we wanted to be once we started doing this thing. Olympics, WNBA, right? But during my career, so it's a little bit like sports is a little selfish, right? Because you're working on your skill and you're trying to be good. And I'm super competitive, but I'm really hard on myself. But sometimes I can come across a little bit like not selfish, but like like, dang, man, like ease up on everybody. So you had such high expectations of yourself, but not everybody's on that level. So sometimes it came across like, man, all right, and one of my teammates, Tamika Williams, who's a coach now, Jetter, she's like, hey, everybody loves you, but like every once in a while, just be a little bit more like we, and like, let's like bring them in, you know what I mean? Not so hard and pushy, not necessarily pushy, but just kind of bring them in, do more we than just like, hey, we got, you got to do this. And we got, even though I was doing it to myself and demanding the same thing, it was just like, come with a more of a we, right? And I think that helped, obviously it helped me to start kind of really looking outside of you and making sure everybody else is good. And ultimately that helps the whole group because you're pulling people along, you know what I mean? And you have your stuff together, but let's make sure that everybody else is kind of feeling that togetherness and that team and that care from each other.
Yeah, that's big. That's big. So being a connector, right? Like
It is. Yeah, it's not like you doing your job is great, but if you do it solo in a silo, it isn't. It's not. That's not what it's about. So you have to find your connection with each person, and that takes work. Sil will tell you, each person on the team has a different personality. You have to talk to them different. You observe things. You understand when their energy is not good that day. So that you have to put time not just on the court. If you really want to, those teams that really are top notch and like it's a special unit, it isn't just because they're in the locker room and play games. They're hanging out afterwards. They're making time for each other, whether it's like coffee or this, or if there's a team function, everyone shows up. Not tonight. I'm going to go hang out. It's a lot of work to really connect and then build that trust and that leadership. So.
That's a great point. So like shifting gears, I like what you said there about everybody kind of playing a role. So kind of shifting gears to student athletes. How can student athletes kind of be leaders beyond just being the team captain? You know what I mean? Like you have those few members that are like team captains, but how can student athletes kind of embrace that leadership role?
I can touch bases on this one because on the court, like I'm very shy and I don't say much, and that's kind of my personality. I'd rather lead by example. But it took me until this big age of mine to go back to school and actually have to ask for help. Like leaders also need help too, and that's okay. And so I think letting people know that you're not okay all the time, and sometimes you're going to need that help and have people to lean on. I think also it's a way that you can show leadership academically.
Yeah, and I think so team captains, there's a reason why you get named, right? There's some responsibility, there's some expectations. Obviously you're doing something right, or the coach is trying to challenge you to be more. So maybe giving you the captaincy is you're going to feel like I need to make sure that I'm on my A game, right? And not kind of loosey-goosey or whatever. So there's some motivation on, sometimes people name captains with different reasons. Like maybe this will help their confidence, and this will be a good, you know what I mean? So there are different ways. It's intentional and strategic sometimes. And so, but there's a lot of responsibility because you are the voice. So what goes in your locker room when the coaches aren't around, you're the one that has to nip in the bud, like the complaining, or coach isn't doing this, or you're kind of policing your team. So you're somewhat of an extension of the coach. So has to be communication with the coach and your captains. There has to be some dialogue, with expectations and empowering them and having a clear kind of, vision of what you want from your team. I think those, expectations should be shared to the captain so then they know how to kind of respond. But I do think there's all of that you can groom as a coach. I think I've learned over the years that our coaches actually were purposeful about what they were doing to us. We didn't know it, now you see it, like the conversations, the empowering you or things, you're like, oh yeah, you know what I mean? But there's literally some strategy to why they tell you things or and try to make you think of things differently. So I just think the communication piece from coach to captain, and then captains really valuing what they are, not allowing things to go on that shouldn't be going on, and making sure that they also are leading by example. Because if they're not doing the right things, then being a captain is kind of a moot point.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I heard you say, Katie, it's so important as coaches to share with the student athletes the expectation so that they can enforce. It's almost like a boundary, right? Like this is what's cool and what's not after the game. And that lives out our team values, and it keeps everybody safe and a sense of belonging, right? Because then we're not talking smack about each other, because that's not what coach wants us to do. And then you sort of pass on those skills, right? Because I'm just guessing, as we know how sports, you do kind of retire, Sylvia, and leave, and but your values and role modeling of holding, others accountable transfers on. So I love that. But what the biggest takeaway I heard from you, Katie, and correct me if I'm wrong, was communicate those values and expectations.
Yeah, you do, because you're being a mind reader or not knowing what you're trying to get done is hard. And then also doing it with some love and care. All right. You gotta find things that you care about with your teammates and care about who you're doing it with. So if you're just telling people what to do, it's not going to go over well. If you connect with them and care about them and are doing things outside of just basketball and look out for them and, do some team functions, then, they're going to hear you differently. They're going to take in those words differently than if you don't talk to them at all. So.
Sure. Any examples from both of you on how you would advise the coaches who are listening in to kind of, Katie, you said be really intentional, Sylvia, kind of purposeful. What are some intentional or purposeful ways they could teach leadership outside of that communicating expectations and values? Any other thoughts?
Holding them to standards. One thing that I loved about our Minnesota coaches and staff, that they treated everybody the same. I don't care if you was the starting five to the last person who got off the bench. Everybody had a role to play, and they made sure that they communicated that this is your role and this is how you contribute, and you allowed to do other things outside of this box, but this is what we need from you today at the moment. So yeah, communication do play a big part in that, but I like straightforwardness about what you need and what you want and how you want me to get it done.
And I think there's another piece. There's reinforcing what you actually want them to continue doing, whether it's a behavior, whether it's something on the court or field. It's not yelling at them what you don't want them to do. It's bringing to attention the things that were like outstanding, like, or the cheering on the bench, instead of like, why do we do this? You know what I mean? Like that, again, the negative, positive, trying to like switch that. And it's not an easy thing to do, but somewhat, again, the purposefulness. I guess I didn't realize, as a player until now you're on the coaching side, every huddle, pre-practice huddle, every team meeting before a game or film session, like the best coaches have an agenda. There is a reason why they're saying what they're saying. It's either for that game. It's either to it's something to kind of hit home about team. It's just wild that now that you're kind of on this side for the last 9 years, it's just the good ones. There is a purpose to every huddle, to everything that they want to get across, and whether it's a story, whether whatever, but it's also reinforce the things that you are trying to do more of and build and have your program, whether it's the cheering, whether it's anything, taking a charge or whatever, instead of focusing on the negative stuff and all the things we need to do better. It's like focus on those things that you want to see more of, and that positivity. So I think that's also something that kind of switch that, mindset, and then holler at them when you need to. So you gotta throw that in there too.
Can't be a screamer all the time, though.
No, you can't.
Katie is like one of the chill coaches ever.
Yeah, sometimes.
Chill coaches are good. Those are like the player coaches. Those are the ones that players like to respond to.
Katie give you the eye, though. When she give you the eye, you done messed up.
You got a slick mouth too. You just say things. They're like, should we laugh or should we not? Is it not the time to? They get a little nervous, when coaches are around.
Keep them on their toes. That's what I'm hearing too.
So Katie, let's go a little bit further. So tell us about ways, if any, that you kind of give your student athletes, those certain responsibilities or leadership roles. Like Sylvia mentioned it, like everybody has clarity in their role. What does that specifically look like for you?
we have certain players who are kind of ours as assistant coaches, associate head coaches, where we have our people we watch film with, we give them goals. I think that's another thing that allows you, again, sometimes I think all of us, we get a little bit caught in this big picture, right? Of I'm not playing well, I'm playing, I'm playing great, like this big thing. So sometimes to get people on track and to really kind of just stay focused is like give them little things they can focus on. Like Syl had a rebound number every day, an offensive rebound number. My guards might have turnovers. Like the 2-point guards can only have such, these turnovers for the game. So I think giving them goals or things that they can kind of tangible things they can kind of lock into, then they stay a little bit more focused and thinking about kind of the bigger picture, which sometimes feels overwhelming or stressful. And then, I think another thing is just the belief in them. We're always nitpicking. We're always trying to get better. It's never good enough. Like it's not perfect. It never will be. That's why, we're practicing, but we're working towards it. But there's always something, right? There's always something we can work on. But I think there's a time and more of a time when you're instilling that belief in them, of the belief from you as a coach. Like you believe in what they're doing. You believe in the work that you're that you guys have put in, and then hopefully inspiring that belief in themselves, that they believe and trust that the practices that you guys have done, the weightlifting and conditioning, that you are prepared for this and to go out there and play free, right? And no matter what happens at the end of the day, it's not necessarily always about the wins and losses. So I think that trying to give them that power to kind of be free and kind of balancing the work on this, get better at this, but also just the confidence piece, I think is huge, and the belief in themselves, and that you believe in that, and that you believe in them. So finding that balance is, I think, something that is hard, but I think it also, means a lot. So.
Yeah, I took away 3 things you just said. You said, give each athlete their own specific goals, because then they're working toward that. And they're not competing with somebody else. They're getting to be a leader in how they show up to get to that specific goal for them based on their position or their role. You kind of said normalize feedback. I'm always going to be on you. I'm always going to be wanting you to get better. So that means I care maybe. And then this belief in them, I have to be the one who says we've done all the work to get here. Let's show up and play what we practice. But you kind of have to be the voice and role model of that, just we got this mentality. Sylvia, when you think about as a player, the other side of this, we're always kind of thinking of how players can help the other players become better leaders. Do you have any thoughts on how you can kind of teach athletes to mentor maybe younger athletes, or kind of get them ready to move into those leadership roles?
Oh man. Confidence is everything. You can be the last person off the bench, but as long as you have confidence that you can get things done, I think that's a good trait that can transfer over to teaching any leader. And leading by example. You just can't talk the talk without actually putting in the work. And I like that. I don't like to talk as much, but I rather lead by example. So I just let the work speak for itself.
I love that.
Yeah, there's a patience to it. And that's what Syl, I think, really embodies. Is there's some frustrating days and there's frustrating people that we all deal with, and you get under your skin, but there's that patience of kind of finding the good in everyone, and just kind of meeting them where they're at. But the backing up what you're doing and what you're saying is crucial, because we all, at the end of the day, if somebody just talks and doesn't, it can wear you down. It can wear your team down, right? You got to at some point. So, but there has to be a patience about it with some people, because again, we're all at different spaces and places in our growth. I think sometimes I'm older than Syl, but I don't know what I was like when I was playing when I was 21 and 22, but I have no doubt I was a knucklehead in so many ways. You know what I mean? Now so you just reactions or little things that you did. I remember I went to a camp at Ohio University, Amy Pritchard, if anybody knows her from back in the day. And I think I scored a bucket and I put my finger up in the air, yeah, you know what I mean? I did something about me. It was about me. boy, she said something to me afterwards, kind of in joking. She was funny. And, but she said, I don't know what it was, but she said something, but boy, I didn't do it again. It was not about me. And it wasn't about, you know what I mean? Doing all this extra stuff. And so it just caught me and it made me think like, I don't want to be, I don't want to be that person, I don't want to be that player. So it's just little things like that. And I think that communication, and if somebody wants to be better, they're going to listen. So even doing it the right way, celebrating the right way, losing the right way, because again, there's your life lessons that you are not going to get your way. It is not always going to go your way in life, and life's a lot harder than sports. So being able to handle those and kind of walk them through it, even when they do have a meltdown, I think is crucial. And they may not take it at the moment. They may be a little bit defensive or whatever, but hopefully they'll hear you.
That's really, really good. And you just touched on it, Katie. Let's dive into a little bit more on the other side of it, because everybody wants to talk about leadership and the, kumbaya, let's bring it all together. But you mentioned there's some hard days, right? So you can talk about it. Like, tell us about the hardships of leadership. You know what I mean? What are the difficulties that you face when trying to lead people? What are some of those challenges? What does that look like? And how do you get over it? You know what I mean? As a leader.
I mean, you almost have to let it come to you, because on every team, there's going to always be strays. It's going to be somebody who don't believe in what the team is doing, who think it's about them, who only want to be better because of themselves and not putting team first. So you almost have to continue to believe in yourself and do what you're good at. And at some point, they're going to have to tag along and believe what the team believe, or they're going to get left behind. And so that kind of gets frustrating at times. But at the end of the day, if you have more teammates buying in, I think the team will be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a challenge, right? And there goes, like, say if the players are not annoyed, but if say they're struggling with someone, but the coach is allowing them to just continue to do some of these behaviors that are hurting the team,
right?
Then there's the disconnect of the buy-in from coach to players. You know what I mean? So they're the captaincy, the awareness, the observing and understanding of your values and what you want. And you can't allow one to kind of trump everybody when it's in the negative. But that buy-in and belief is tough, when they don't listen. But with Sylvia, the good thing, about Syl and really good leaders is they have a strength about them and a belief in that what they're doing and how they're treating people is the right way. So, because you can get to a place, somebody will wear you down. You're just like, whatever, just do whatever you want to do. Right. You know what I mean? So you have to have that conviction of, this is what we're doing. This is why I believe that this is the right way. I believe this is the way you should treat people. I know we're not going to stand for that. So I think there needs to be, you need to know what your non-negotiables are when you're leading teams and groups, because then that breaks down all the camaraderie and the connectedness that you have as a team if you have something that's kind of pulling everybody apart. So, but it takes a lot of strength to continue on a path when you're getting challenged or not, somebody's not listening or could care less.
Yeah. Got to stay strong in your convictions, know those values. It sounds like Sylvia's a model of that, where accountability and even through that, I like that word conviction. I can almost feel it when Katie talks about you, of just like people knew if they were kind of BSing you a little bit or something, it was like, no, I don't stand for that. And yet you also had the quiet confidence to be like, I'm just going to keep doing my thing and lead by example. And how I feel about that by the way I'm behaving. So we have a bunch of coaches on here, and you both know it better than anybody else. Like, sport is also a platform. It really is a place where you are a leader on a court or on a field, but you also have younger kids looking up to you, other peers, a community. When you two think about being a good role model or being a good citizen, how do you think we can do that using the platform of sport for kids?
Katie.
Sports is life, right? And I've been blessed, I get to be with somebody like Syl, but I came from a small town, majority white. And my parents are from Cleveland, so I wasn't born and raised in Southeastern Ohio, but it opened my world to just everything. And I think with sports is challenging yourself to expose your kids to different things, to make sure that every single person on your team is valued and seen, whether it's their pronouns, whether it's, somebody who doesn't have, the money or the monetary means to do some things, or the shoes, or those that do, just making sure that they all understand the respect factor. So I think and then also what's going on in the world, like whatever's happening at the moment, it affects kids. It affects all of us. It affects our teams. Like we've gone through a lot, and the W is always at the forefront of social justice and all the issues that are going on. We're such a diverse group, and just such, obviously amazing women that are in the league. But I think it's a place to have it be a safe space to just make sure if somebody's struggling, maybe, you know what I mean? I think you can talk about things and just allow it to be there. Don't just get scared of it or just isolate yourself. I mean, these guys are going through it at school. I mean, they're hearing things and seeing things, and probably had comments said to them for whatever reason. So making sure it's a safe space, that your team values everyone, no matter what, where, whatever the differences that are there. And even when you travel, you might be an all-white team going to the inner city, or you're going to play, like, don't act up. And if you do act up, then we're going to have a real serious problem. We're going to have some conversations with parents, and we're just not going to fly. It's always, do the right thing at all times. And obviously make sure that you're communicating with parents, especially, younger kids. Obviously include them in what you're discussing and saying, hey, is this okay? So making sure that they're looped in as well. I think that's another piece of younger kids. Obviously we're, adults on our level, but I think with the younger kids, I think it's a-okay to make sure that parents and everybody's involved in conversations or issues that have come up, to make sure that you address. And if a parent has a problem with you addressing something that was wrong, probably shouldn't be on your team. So, I mean, that's, what I mean? If that's not what you want. So
Great advice. Inclusivity, making sure parents know the expectations, getting them involved. Sylvia, you have a thought there on, platform of sport and being a good citizen? Maybe tell us your story. How do you use sport, to demonstrate leadership off the court?
Just as like Katie say, educating yourself. That's one thing I think we did do great with Minnesota and our staff. You have all these issues outside of basketball that comes up, and having that safe space to talk to your coaches, or to talk to your teammates, or talk to your team therapists, just give you that much ease of, like, when things are not going right. But I would definitely say educate yourself. Don't be afraid to ask questions when you don't know things, and have those hard conversations in the locker room with your coaches and your teammates.
All right, Q, you want to give them the final question, the hardest one?
Yeah, this is the hard one, so I hope you're ready for this one. Katie, Sylvia, if you can wave your magic wand, right, and tell the coaches on the call and in the world one thing regarding leadership development through sport, what would it be? What's your take-home message for leadership development?
Patience.
That's a good one.
I don't think I have any, but Katie gives me way more credit than I do.
She does.
Patience.
Yeah. Patience. Good. For me, it's I think it is the communication part, or finding. I think you have to be creative these days. When you think about, especially the younger crew, I just think there has to be some creative ways of getting, like, your point across. Not just saying this will, just don't do it halfway. You know what I mean? It's like, maybe give them some, I don't know, it's a video game type analogies and things. I think the ones that are storytellers are, like, do the best, but I think there has to be some type of creative teaching. But at the end of the day, it does go back to caring. If you're just doing it to do it and you don't particularly care, I think you have to genuinely care about what you're doing, who you're doing it, you're doing, why you're doing it, understand your purpose. But then I just think these days you just can't tell them, and they get it. I know at our level it's hard enough, and we deal with the elite. We deal with the elite of the elite and the motivated. And then you get to the youth and high school and all of this, and it's like there is that range of this and that. It's just it's trying to connect with them and trying to find something that maybe they'll light their fire a little bit and keep them involved somehow. I just think it's such a challenge, but I think it's also rewarding, because, I mean, thank goodness, I'm sure Syl as well, the coaches that we had did something right, and thank goodness they did it. You know what I mean? Just thankful that they gave their time and really were, and it made us, it made me fall in love with the sports. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you both. We're going to do a brief little Coach Beyond kind of lesson here and some take homes for coaches. And then we're going to open the floor for you two for questions. So if you two want to jump in the chat, that's what Sid's probably going to be bringing to you. So you can kind of get ready. But really quickly, for all the coaches on the call, our goal is to reach coaches and have them, leverage sport as a place to help young people grow and develop. And so a lot of our Coach Beyond work has kind of thought about all the ways that sport teaches you skills to get ready to be a leader kind of outside of sport. And so we kind of ground our thoughts around this in this leadership development through sport model, where you can look at these just names, a game day leader, right? And think, what did I learn on game day that actually transfers into the real world? So like Sylvia might be like, that pregame huddle when I had to get the team ready for that big game against so-and-so, that's the same as you're going to have in that staff meeting when you have to pitch that new idea or policy, right? And get everybody on board. We think about locker room leaders. Katie, you said this really well, when it's how do we want to act after we win? A really good day on the job or with our families or with our friends. How also are we going to react when we don't get the contract, or when it's a really tough day or somebody kind of bombs, right, the presentation? How do we want to show up for each other? Social leaders, Katie, you mentioned this inclusivity piece. How do we be social and make sure everyone feels included? As coaches, we have to talk a lot about the bullying context right now for young people, and making sure that sport doesn't become a place where it's us versus them, it's team. Brave leaders, Sylvia, I love that you mentioned sort of the piece about, going and talking to a team therapist or asking for help. Really strong leaders ask for help when they need it. And so that's how we can help young people be brave. And then engagement leaders, being involved in the community. I was just out at Hilliard, if anybody's on the call from Hilliard, and the whole football team went up to the band after and thanked them for the whole season, right? Of just being there and being the band and cheering them on. And it's an engagement, it's supporting your community. And so we have in our PowerPoint just a couple different ways that we think student athletes can kind of show up as these game day leaders. And then we're going to focus here on kind of what coaches can do. So Katie, you nailed this, right? The game day leaders is set the expectations, especially about sportspersonship, how you win and lose with your athletes. And then certainly delegating some leadership roles and responsibilities. So when we think about locker room leaders, again, this is our boundaries on how we're going to talk to each other, but there's Katie's point again on reinforcing what you want to see. Reinforce how we want our athletes to treat each other and the respect that they bring. And then I loved, that you said be really intentional about the talks, but I also think, Sylvia, you kind of brought this up, like it might be on me to give the side eye or kind of make sure I'm fixing team dynamics by leading by example. But it may be more effective as you as a leader leading by example, holding Q accountable if he's late for practice than Katie, because that person's new on the team and wants to win you over. And so these locker room, dynamics are so important and transfer into life too. And we can teach them through sport. Social, when we think about this, what's happening around diversity, equity, and inclusion, encouraging athletes to mentor each other and not create the hierarchy of I'm a senior, you're a freshman. It's really that I can learn something from everybody. And so we can, have athletes also plan how they spend time together outside of sport. That's a really huge one. We just talked to a team, they all carved pumpkins together for Halloween. And that feeling of being a young person with your teammates, it's so important and creates social bonds that help them be leaders. And then we really encourage our high school coaches to talk about the web, why everyone belongs on the team, why they're there. Katie, you said this so well when you said, everybody's got a role. And Sylvia, you said everybody's treated the same. Whether you're starting or not, this is something that coaches can do in front of their student athletes. And then we just have the kind of last two, engagement leaders. So much of being a high school student athlete is the opportunity to support other student athletes, because they're the folks who've got the final exam with you and the practice till 7 and then rushing home to get a shower. And we're all teenagers, right? But where you can encourage student athletes to support other teams maybe that tennis team has had 3 people come to the game all season. And so Sylvia says, come on, we're going out to tennis as basketball, and we're going to engage our school and support that culture. Katie at Logan Hocking, they all do the cheers. They got them on YouTube. Did you know this? You got to check it out. Yeah. It's awesome, right? Those are engagement leaders.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. They do the roller coaster and everything.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was a senior on the girls soccer team who recorded all the cheers for everybody in the school to be able to go to a football game or a basketball game and know how to be engaged, right? That's so cool. So all these different ways. And then our last one, Sylvia, you hit the nail on the head here, asking for help. Coaches, we have to normalize that our young people right now are coming out of COVID and needing supports in different ways. And so normalizing that ability to ask for help. Coaches admitting when they're wrong, right? I'm a professor. I do it all the time. Like, oh gosh, that was totally messed up. I own it today. Here's how we're going to respond. Katie, you've owned your mistakes. Sylvia, yeah, true.
Yes.
Totally. And then we say, coaches, make sure you have that open door for them to be brave and come talk to you about playing time and all those things that can be really hard to do as a young person, but are life skills, because you might have to go talk to your boss. You might have to go talk to a supervisor, right? So those are our kind of leadership skills. We have a couple resources we're going to drop in the chat. Sydney's going to put our Coach Beyond leadership inventory. So all of those bullets that you saw on the left side of your screen that were about student athlete behaviors, we actually created an inventory for them to take it and think about where they fall in these different domains. And then the back allows for you as coaches to collect them and help each athlete set a leadership goal for the season. So we would love if you would use that resource. And then we're also going to drop a reading in the chat. If you're one of those folks who likes a brief article, Dr. Dan Gold and Dana Vogler have written an amazing article on how we can teach leadership through sport and physical education. So really encourage you all to use those things and find ways to coach beyond. So with that being said, we are going to open it up for questions. So we've seen some in the chat. Sid, give us some of the best questions we got, and we're going to have Q, Sylvia, and Katie jump in here to answer.
Absolutely. So the first question that came in from the audience was, oh, can you hear me? Yeah, you can hear me. Okay. Was that, you both, Katie and Sylvia, have existed in both peer roles and coach student athlete, or not student athlete, but athlete roles. And so we're wondering, what kind of leadership skills did you, Katie, teach Sylvia when you were a coach? And maybe both of you can reflect, or how did you both teach each other leadership skills, and what have you learned from
I got a good
our
one.
time. Yeah, no, I mean, when we played together on Olympic team.
Mhm.
And I was a vet and they were the babies. Syl was a baby at that time. And we're wired very similar. Syl and my personality are very similar. We're just kind of like do our job, low maintenance, treat each other right and people right. And then we think things are very funny. We catch people slipping and, just laugh. But we're just low maintenance. So we connected in that level. So I think it was just like somewhat, kind of attracted to each other because of just like, you're just easygoing, our personalities mesh. So as a player, I think, that was kind of how we did things. And maybe Syl being a little younger was like, I like this crew over here because they just were a little bit more low maintenance. With Syl, there wasn't a lot to teach Syl. It was more, sometimes as coaches, you're just there for them, to support them, to motivate, but just sometimes just kind of give them either reassurance, or every once in a while, like, get yourself together and like get, you know what I mean? Like, you're better than that. So Syl was at a level is more of, didn't necessarily just have to do a lot of coaching. It was more of somewhat of a relationship piece of just every once in a while kind of chiming in when you thought so. Maybe needed just a little something. So that's what I thought. I'm sure who knows what Sylvia thought of me.
I mean, I can agree. So yeah, she was my vet with Team USA, and you come in like a deer in headlights because it's your first rodeo, and so you kind of like scope out like who you can like hang with, who has your similar personalities, who believe in what you believe in. And Katie was that person. And so I followed her around a couple of days, and she was like, yeah, this is what you got to do. So she pretty much took me under her wing. She was like, don't be late, be the first one at the gym, do this, do that. And so you have to like find people who believe in like your belief system and not get caught up in all the hype around other things. And and you also need that coach to be on you every now and then when things don't quite go your way. And I think Katie showed up for me a lot of times in that way where I just didn't feel like I was given enough, and she just have to give that reassurance of like, this is what you need to do better, or you doing this okay, you just in your head.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I hear you both kind of saying we're going back to that idea of holding the same core values, and that really helps when leadership and teaching it and modeling it for one another. And then also just knowing people. Like it sounds like Katie knew you, so she knew what you might need, or she knew when you were having an off day and maybe needed that extra encouragement or that feedback, or hey, get out of your head, you're up here, And I guess for you, we're just wondering, like, what have you learned from your coaches? What do you try to purposefully teach when you're coaching the men's basketball team?
Yeah, I would say probably consistency. I think Katie mentioned it earlier and Sylvia alluded to it, but just being the same person every day. You know what I mean? Like, I think consistently kind of people know what you're going to be every single day. You're not going to have the peaks and valleys and that unpredictability. That's what I've seen. The best leaders that I've come across in sport have been the consistent ones, the ones that you can count on and you know what they are every single day.
That's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. And I love that's something we haven't quite heard yet either, right? It's that consistency. And like I always think of, I loved when my leaders like would follow through, right? They were accountable and consistent and showed up for me. So, and we have another question. This one is from Les, and it says, leading by example is hard at the high school level because some of these kids are not yet mature enough to value it. I think we were touching on that a little bit of like, we weren't necessarily aware when we were being taught, I'm sure I'm still not aware all the time when I'm being purposely taught certain skills. So how do you suggest that a coach or you as a coach would handle that when you're like, I'm doing all this and you're maybe not seeing the value in this?
Man, one thing I definitely can say I learned over like the last 2 seasons probably was crucial for me is when I can't lead by example, or me leading by example is not for somebody else. I don't go to them and be like, why are you doing it this way? I go to them and be like, well, what did you see to make you do things this way? And so just trying to see it from their perspective also helps too, instead of like just badging them about like, you're not doing this, you're not getting it done. It's like, how are you seeing it from your perspective? Like, how can I help you from your point of view is something that I've learned.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Sil. I'm trying to turn it to something that maybe they value or and again, framing the question and the conversation in a way that doesn't put their defense mechanisms up, that doesn't push them back. It's trying to frame it in a way that they'll share or try to understand the why part. You know what I mean? Not just the what they did, but just like, where did that come from? Or, and just try to, it's the wording, communication, being a good communicator. And it's just hard and observing, understanding when you could see things that aren't, but also I think communication, also immediate and direct, is also crucial. That communication isn't my favorite thing to do, but Sylvia has been coached by one of the best communicators I've ever been around, and that's Cheryl Reeve, who's the head coach at Minnesota. Truly, truly one of the best communicators I've ever been around, both framing things, both the thought behind it, and then the very direct and immediate communication that you have. Not allowing, she said this one time in a meeting at the Bubble, that somebody didn't play or something, and all of a sudden it goes down that rabbit hole. And they think the coach hates them. And then it goes into, I'm talking to my parents and my friends, and they don't even care about me. And it just keeps going and going and going. So having a communication, if there was something that I'm sorry, I didn't play you, this is the reason why. It's also being immediate about it, because a lot of times as players, we go off into this other world, and then it can go really bad. where you take it when it has nothing to do with that. And I think that's also when a coach is aware of having immediate, communication, so you can kind of keep it from going places it shouldn't go.
I would just add to that, Katie, you mentioned it earlier, being creative. I know our head coach, Coach Holtman, does a great job with kind of giving examples at their level, like finding stuff. I mean, you can find anything on social media and like a YouTube clip, or like when you watch ball or interview of an example that going back to like your team standards or core values, something you're trying to portray. And like, of course, our guys look up to NBA players and the women look up to the WNBA players and, professional baseball or football. But you can find an example of what you were trying to get across that, okay, maybe they're tired of listening to you, but they'll listen to Kevin Durant. They'll listen to Sylvia Fowles. You know what I mean? So find that example and then using it kind of to convey your message.
Yeah.
Love that. You're all bringing up such good points around, communication. And really, I like this piece of both giving the why and then understanding the why. So like understanding the why in somebody's story, but then also giving your why and your rationale. And then, if your voice isn't enough, like let's bring in another voice and see if that resonates a little bit more. We're getting a lot of questions rolling in, so I'm trying to catch as many as possible, but I know we've spent a lot of time and we want to emphasize that, everyone on the team can learn leadership skills in different ways, but we got one specific question around team captains. And they said, they've seen team captaincy be done by choosing via player vote or the coach choosing people. There's a lot of different models out there for choosing captains. And I know, Katie, you were talking about sometimes you choose a captain because you want to push them, right? Or sometimes you choose it because they're really demonstrating those leadership qualities. And so do y'all have an opinion on what process is best for choosing team captains?
I don't know. That's a tough one. I think at our level, it's mostly been appointed. What I remember mostly is they've been mostly coach driven. So do I have an opinion? Feel free, somebody else. I don't.
It's okay if you don't too.
I don't know if high school kids, depending on the crew, it could be a messy. What dictates in middle school, like what dictates their vote? It could be how many followers they have. I don't know. You know what I mean? It just is. It's feels a little could be go wrong depending on the group that you have, I guess. But I probably lean towards coach driven. That would be held my feet to the fire.
I'm not a coach, so I don't know.
No, but as a player though, how did it feel to you? Like, what would have more value?
Coach driven, because a coach like their players, yeah, you might not get to see them like in the locker room when you're not in the locker room, but players talk, like, so you got certain players that go back and tell coach, this is how you act when you're around this group or this around this group, or, so I think coach driven probably will be my go-to instead of having a team vote, because that's when you get into, oh, this is my friend and I like her more and I don't, so it kind of gets like messy and all that. So yeah.
Okay, I see Q nodding his head, so I'm just going
I
to
agree.
some agreement there.
I'm bowing out of that one. Yeah, y'all
Yeah,
got it.
so it sounds like it kind of depends too on where the level is of play as well, and sort of what your values are too. So, and what do you think is, going to be the most helpful for your team? Your team and which style might be the best. So the next question we got is, what do you do when an athlete on a team who's supposed to be a leader doesn't really take on that role, or maybe they make poor decisions or they choose not to lead when you really need them to step up and lead? And how do you handle that scenario?
I think it's depending on who they are. If they have been somebody who's been consistent and been a leader, and then there's a situation, I think the initial reaction would be, what's wrong with you? You know what I mean? Depending on who you are, I don't know, but I think there has to be a tempered kind of, again, the why, like, why did this happen? If it isn't a regular thing. And I think understanding there's something going on somewhere else. Did something happen on the team? There's something outside of basketball? Or sports in general. I think we like to think that basketball is it's its own world, that nothing on the outside comes in, but it does. What happens in our worlds and is going around us and in our lives affects us. So there could be a reaction or something, and hopefully understanding the why. And then obviously expressing why that's not acceptable, or why that was problematic for the team or themselves, or for you as a coach, and how it wasn't helpful. But just really, again, trying not to create that defensive, attacking, you know what I mean? There's that patience, there's the whys, all of that, of trying to come to it at that moment, or maybe you have to come back to it to make sure that you're in a better place. It's just like trying to understand the why, especially if it wasn't something this person hasn't been for that time.
I agree with Katie, but also too, like, that trust factor plays a big part in that too. So the coach is trusting you on a level that they know when something's wrong and when to come to you and when to address it. I think that's one thing that I really did appreciate about our Minnesota coaches, because when I wasn't on my A game of like communicating or wanting to talk that day when things wasn't going right at practice, and when I had a lot on my shoulders, like, they always pulled me to the side and be like, well, you wasn't really yourself today. You wasn't talking this much. You wasn't correcting things that you want normally let slide. And so I think having that trust factor to know that I'm going to tell them what's going on, but also like understanding that they have my best interests. And so, yeah, and address it directly. Let them know, like, this is unacceptable and this is not how leaders lead, and remind them like how you should be leading by example.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think, Sylvia, the thing that you said that resonated with me is pull them to the side.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, those leaders and that coach leader relationship is so important. That's different. It's different from the coach leader relationship than the coach, like, I hate to say, like, the coach and everybody else relationship. Your leaders are on a different pedestal. Your leaders are a different, they have a different role. So I think the relationship that the coach has with those leaders is different. And I think that's an important conversation that needs to be had, the good ones and the bad ones. That you have to be able to have that clarity and that trust factor. All that stuff is super important.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear y'all saying so much about, one, it's pulling the player to the side, it's communicating the why, and it's upholding your expectations and your standards. And then also on this foundation of, hey, we trust each other and I have your best interest in mind. And that's why I'm really calling you out for this, right? So I love that. And I think with that, we've had so many great questions coming in, and unfortunately only so much time. So we're going to go ahead and pass it back over to Sam to bring us home. So pass it over to you. Thank y'all.
Yeah, thanks, Sid. That was an awesome Q&A. There were a couple other hard ones sprinkled in there. So if Katie and Sylvia, y'all want to chat them a paragraph or Q, I think I saw one come in on parents. So y'all can take that one. We'll have a whole other webinar on parents one night. So come on back. Folks, if you're on the call, we would love to be able to engage you. If you complete our evaluation and leave your email address, we do get you a CEU that you can submit to your local school district. If you're a teacher educator or coach educator. Also, if you just want the kind of hour attended to this amazing webinar and learning opportunity from Katie and Sylvia, we would be glad to send you that certificate. So I'm going to leave this up here for just a moment, and then I'm going to let you all know that our next webinar is coming up on January 30th, and it's going to be on fostering a positive team environment. So Q and I will be hosting. Sydney will be back managing the chat. Guest speakers to come. We haven't rolled those out yet, so we'll leave y'all waiting, kind of like a drum roll as we head into 2023. So please make sure you complete that evaluation. Here are other webinar topics that are coming up in the spring. Invite you back to do life skill development, a really important one on stress and pressure as coaches, which I'm sure Katie and Sylvia could have also done a whole hour on today. So please watch our website. If you're also interested in signing up for our Coach Beyond Minute, you just want to shoot us an email. That's a monthly newsletter where we send out coaching tips and tricks. as well as some of those resources like that leadership inventory. So please go to go.osu.edu/coachbeyond if you're interested in learning more. Q and I are happy to answer questions and follow up. Let's give everybody in the chat just a big thank you to Katie and Sylvia tonight. Thank you so much for your time. We are so appreciative and look forward to having another Coach Beyond webinar here in January. So thank you all.